And thanks for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here, Monday through Friday, 12 noon, live at YouTube and subscribing platforms. Welcome to the program. And let's see, my guest is Bruce Hartman, and Bruce is I believe that Bruce, you're a pastor,
Yes,
you're an author,
yes,
you're a religion and political analyst.
yes, yeah.
Your book is A Year with Jesus, an inspirational story of finding Jesus and faith. Before we get into anything, we obviously have to talk about the most important story today and possibly even in our lifetime, and which is that tomorrow is the election day. And I am having a lot of trouble, relaxing. I can't barely sleep. I'm looking at
Mm,
50, 60 articles a day. I think a lot of people are. I
yeah,
keep at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm there with my smartphone and headphones on, looking at interviews and trying to. There's just so much at stake. I shudder to think of what would happen if Trump lost. It would be completely irrational, given the fact that he's been an extremely successful president by any objective metric on just about all issues. And yet, the forces that are arrayed against him are so determined, and I would argue so satanic, that they really have nonstop done everything they can from the minute he took office to today to destroy his presidency. And I just hope and pray that they did not uh, damage. And even with all that damage, the success has been extraordinary. So, Bruce, what are your thoughts with regard to what's happening tomorrow and what's happening on the street?
well, I think what you said something that was really important is that this may be the most important election of our lifetime. And I completely agree. This is the same as when Lincoln or FDR,
Yeah.
these are changes, seismic changes. And the other thing you said about satanic forces, what's happening in our country is really it's ironic in some of the stuff that's happening, but I look at it as follows. Our God asks us to trust Him. Socialists ask us to trust the government, and to me, that's as fundamental a difference. So, for instance, what do I mean by that? Our freedoms are given to us by God, not by the government.
Right.
And I think our basic freedoms are at stake. You take a look at the city of New York City, and I worked in New York City for many years. It's embarrassing, and it's also disheartening what's happened to the city. The friends of mine that live there tell me about the crime. They tell me about um, the loss of freedoms that they have. And I have a friend that lives in the West Village, and they have to barricade the streets at night just to protect that little enclave. And to me, a vote for Biden is a vote for what's going on in some of our major cities. That's where we'll end up, because this defund the police doesn't make any sense. And some of the things that we're seeing nationally, I think, are going to strip us of our freedom, and also strip us of our religious practices, because more and more, I believe that Democratic Party is moving us away from practicing religion. And I think with Trump, he's done probably more than any president, including Reagan, of bringing religion back into our country. So that's
Yeah.
my view.
Well, that's my view as well. The question is, do other people, younger people in particular, understand this? Religious freedom, Trump undid a large portion of the Johnson Amendment, which basically put a muzzle on preachers,
Right?
wouldn't allow them to take moral positions based on the scriptures. You could lose your tax exemption, you could be prosecuted, I should say. Um,
And persecuted.
and persecuted by all means. And he stood up for religious freedom. He's stood up against an agenda that would have forced Catholic institutions to finance abortions.
Right.
These are significant things. These were significant abrogations of freedom. So I'm hoping that religious people can understand that and come out and vote. This is the real backbone of Trump's victory. And I mean by religious people, religious Protestants and Catholics and Jews. I mean, there's even been a Jewish rally in New York that's pro-Trump. Jews for Trump, my fellow Jews, pro-Trump. I can't believe it. And people throwing garbage at them and yelling anti-Semitic slurs. Fine, they were out there marching down across Brooklyn Bridge. I mean, I think that a lot of people who are of faith, who are being quiet about their support for Trump because the ramifications can be pretty bad, both in terms of career and safety. They're going to come out in the sacred space of that voting booth, which is the closest thing a secular society has to a sacred space, and they're going to vote for Trump and not even perhaps tell their own spouse. I mean, the people.
Right.
I mean, I would hope. I mean, I think that's all we can hope and pray for right now, because younger people in particular are being brainwashed by these left-wing institutions of culture and education. And they imbibe this stuff at an early age, and they don't turn back. They don't think. And I think that, I mean, on the other hand, if Biden, God forbid, is elected, people say that, for example, if Hillary Clinton had been president, there never would have been a lockdown on churches. It just never would have happened. People would have been out in the street. They would have been resisting. So maybe there'll be a strengthening, I don't know, of awareness. I mean, this Trump movement is unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it. And I'm old enough to have seen a lot of things. People just spontaneously making these makeshift flags and driving in caravans and boat parades all over the country, even right here in my own state of Massachusetts. I'm seeing it on street corners, people waving flags. It's an unbelievable movement. It's a cultural movement, and it's hopefully going to lead to a cultural shift.
Yeah, I think you've done a good job, explaining to me, and I think to other people, that this Trump movement. What I've heard, these people that don't own up to being a Trump follower, it's because they're fearful or shy. So, for instance, if you look at the Trafalgar or the Rasmussen polls, both of those individuals that run those organizations say that they can't measure the shy Trump voter. Now, the reason why they're shy isn't because they're naturally shy. It's what you just said.
Right.
They're not going to tell their spouse because they don't want the noise.
Right.
They're not going to tell their friends because they don't want the noise. And that's what we saw in 2016. My sense is we're going to see that again in 2020 because of some of the things that you said. You look at a Biden rally, I mean, they're bored.
Horrible.
It's like going to a T.
And he can't put two words together in a sentence. And I mean, it's the most bizarre thing that I've seen. And meanwhile, you've got Harris there with this giggling and laughing. It's so unbecoming for a presidential candidate. And, I would hope that people will wake up and see also that right now, this country is undergoing the single biggest agenda of censorship in American history, in the refusal to cover this scandal that's emanating out of Biden's family, where he's using influence peddling to enrich his son, his brothers, his sisters, his son-in-law, everyone around him, and basically abusing his office, going all the way back to the U.S. Senate, but especially as vice president on an international scale, to enrich himself for money, selling American, prerogatives in exchange for money. And not only that, but I mean, of all the talking for the environment, it seems like he's taking off an awful lot of money from oil companies from totalitarian countries like China.
And Burisma.
And Burisma, not to mention. I mean, these are corrupt oil companies. What do you think they do? Anyway, it's an outrageous thing. But the thing that's most troubling is the outright, open, and brazen censorship. Even NPR, which gets federal monies, flat out said, we are not covering this Hunter Biden scandal. I mean, what kind of a thing is that? What is this, the Soviet Union? What do you mean? What do they say, Pravda? What do you mean they're not covering it?
Yeah, it's very disheartening because, Leslie Stahl, I'm sure you saw the interview, she kept telling President Trump, it's unverified. It isn't unverified.
That's absolute lie. Of course,
It
it's verified. It's been verified by many people who received the emails. Not to mention the fact that I think it would be awfully difficult, if not impossible, for someone to create videos and texts and emails. These are pictures. You can't recreate. I mean, that's ridiculous. Meanwhile, they're publishing, this phony dossier and Trump's tax returns, which is illegal.
yeah.
That's no problem. So, the hypocrisy, I just hope that enough people can see that and see the danger that that presents. This kind of false, slanted reporting. They come out with like one source, the New York Times, which is supposed to be respectable. They got one anonymous source saying that Trump was endorsed by the Taliban. Then the next day they retracted quietly because they had no evidence of it, but the damage was done. It's a political hit. That's how they do it. That would be like if I called the Boston Globe and said that Joe Biden raped my wife. I mean, and then they run it with a front page article. There's no verification. These are all political hits. That's what the media has become. And it is so corrupt. Trump is so right about that. And when he says that, he's defending all of us, liberal and conservative. We shouldn't have that in this country. If the liberals want to come out and make a case, let them do it. We don't, they don't have to use censorship and cancel culture, because that's what we're going to have. It's a soft totalitarian tyranny if Biden's elected. Cancel culture will come along, and anyone that doesn't goose step and zig heil to the left is going to be expunged from the public square.
Yeah, the cancel culture is a prelude to this. So one of the things I came across this weekend, and you use this word critical thinking. Too many people that I know listen to CNN and believe CNN. What they don't understand is that only 6 people run 90% of the media sources in our country.
That's right.
And so you're not going to hear this story, but it was on, I think it was on Tucker Carlson. And then I did some research on it. Adam Schiff's chief of staff visited the Ukraine while they're trying to impeach the president. Mm. And one of his big supporters for his reelection that's going on right now, who has held dinners for him, is this oligarch from the Ukraine. Now, again, how's that not in the newspapers? I mean, you and I come from the Nixon era, and that's when journalism was journalism. We didn't care if you were Democrat or Republican or left or right. If you did something wrong, it ended up in the newspaper. So while Adam Schiff is calling the president names you should never call a president, he's basically doing something worse than what he was accusing the president of.
Well, I mean, this whole thing is a gigantic case of projection anyways. I mean,
yes.
It was Hillary Clinton that was colluding with the Soviets and the Russians. I mean, Biden's son just took a $3.5 million payment from some Russian oligarch who's connected to Putin, apparently used some of the money for prostitutes. I mean, why would they give him $3.5 million transferred to his bank account? That's verifiable. That's something that's out there. President Trump brought it up during the debates, and Biden just sits there and he lies. Never happened. This is, it's interesting that at the first debate, the left was talking about bringing in fact checkers every second because they allege that President Trump lies. You don't hear them talking about fact checkers now.
No.
I mean, these are big lies. I mean, President Trump may tell an occasional fib, which I think I hold that against him. He'll talk about crowd sizes and that sort of thing. But he doesn't tell these kinds of lies that actually are serious, covering up crime, or lies that hurt people, like, you can keep your health care, you can keep your insurance. These are big lies. Those are the kinds of, they're not angry at Trump for telling those little lies. They're angry at Trump because he tells the truth.
Right. And he's draining the swamp. Now, so the thing about Trump, I try to explain this to people. You have to remember who he is. He's a real estate person. He's a marketing person.
Yes.
He's always going to embellish.
Sure.
And that just kind of goes for the territory. And, from having to deal with real estate people in my past life, you kind of just know that they say to you, though this is the greatest location in the world, right? That would be a very free. So I mean, you kind of got to learn to filter. But what you're talking about is so much more dangerous because it brings us to 1984, the book written by
Yeah.
George
Yeah.
Orwell.
Orwell. Sure. You bet.
And syntax is more important now than facts. So, for instance, take the BLM movement. It's all syntax. It's not even a tax deductible organization. If you make a contribution, you don't get a tax deduction. The reason is 80% of that money goes to pay their salaries or to consultants.
With the
And
Democratic Party, apparently.
yes, right. And the other thing, think about Charles. A lot of people tell me what what their real intention are by what they do, not what they say. So it's easy to go into Rochester, New York, walk into a restaurant, throw wine into some poor woman's face, shame her, and send her out. I'd rather see them going to the south side of Chicago and participating in after school programs so the children there get to see what life should be. I'd rather see them do like what Thiel College does in Pennsylvania, have the children from the inner city come be on their campus. That's if we're really going to have a Black Lives Matter movement, let's go to the tough places. Going to a Rochester restaurant, throwing wine in some woman's face and shaming her, that doesn't take a big person to do that. That's just, you're doing it just to get credit. Let's see them in Newark. Let's see them in Mattapan, in Roxbury. Let's see them in South Side of Chicago. And we're not seeing them there.
No,
That's
I
where,
mean, we are seeing them there, along with Antifa. They're looting black businesses, burning
right,
black neighborhoods,
right.
killing black people, including 3 children just last weekend in Chicago. They're there, all right. They're there with, they talk about, the Second Amendment, which calls for well-regulated militias. I think it's the Democrats who are supporting very unregulated militias, communist terrorists who are burning down our cities. This, I think, is why more and more black people are voting for Trump. They don't
That's
want to
right.
have, they're trying to get to work every day. They're trying to take care of their children, and they're trying to, get on with their lives. They don't need to have these predominantly white left wing terrorists backed by George Soros coming in and destroying their lives. And these people, yet Biden denies they even exist. What does he think? Philadelphia is burning itself down right now somehow? Nobody's doing this? I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, so that's why I call it a syntax issue. They've basically taken an issue that's become fashionable and they've turned it into a power struggle against the establishment, quote unquote. If it was really real, they'd be donating money to Ed Reed's programs in Baltimore or to Street Squash, which is a crazy successful
Yeah,
organization that helps out inner city youth. But they're not doing that. What you
no.
said is what they're doing. They're burning their own buildings down. They don't care about the black people as much as they say they do.
No, they'd be supporting the enterprise zones, which are helping deregulate business and lower taxes and create financial incentives for people to get into business and to expand businesses in those neighborhoods. They're not in any way doing anything for black people. I mean, they offer black people one thing, two things historically, and that's abortion and welfare. That's all they have.
Do you know the number one killer of black people? You know what it is? It's abortion.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, that goes all the way back to Margaret Sanger's Negro Project in the 1930s, setting up abortion clinics in black neighborhoods and then buying off black ministers to support them. This is always their agenda: population control, dependency, uh, really destruction of the black family, destruction of the black church, destruction of black education. Why don't they support vouchers for private schools so that some of these poor kids who are deserving can get the hell out of those miserable schools and get into a charter school or get into like a private school with tax monies deducted from people who want to contribute to that. That's something President Trump has been working for, and they're against that. So they're not helping black people. They're not
No.
helping minorities, and I think that it's showing in the polls. Trump is up among black people, particularly black men. I think black men like his masculine nature. He's up with Hispanics. He's up even with Jews. I mean, believe it or not, I hope. But that's his natural constituency. And in spite of this incessant daily propaganda and these lies, he's got something against black people, which is absurd. That is occurring. I don't know if they'll be able to suppress the black vote with those kinds of lies. That's real voter suppression.
Right. Yeah,
Anyway,
that's. I listened to a commercial last night. I was driving to Charlotte, and uh, it's insulting when you listen to some of these commercials that imply they imply like Obama says, don't let them take your vote away. Don't let them take
yeah,
your. I'm sure you've seen that commercial.
yeah, I've seen that. That's their closing argument.
So, but who is them? And so they're implying that it's something that doesn't exist, but it is the them. And so my point is that's more racist than what they're trying to defend.
Mm.
I don't think the voter suppression that they are telling these folks exists today. It certainly existed in
No,
the past. You know
I
that,
mean,
and I know that.
they're setting it up so that if they do lose tomorrow in some close states, they can declare this and start to hit the streets and start to burn more black businesses and loot more black neighborhoods, and challenge the election by saying that somehow, this lie that there was voter suppression. There's no voter suppression. If you want to vote, you can vote. You can get an absentee ballot. It's insulting actually to black people. What do they think black people are too stupid to do this? It's absurd. It's just absolutely wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I live in Asheville. They're voting in the Home Depot parking lot. I mean, they're talking. I've never seen a more open election.
And how do you think they go? Which direction do you think they're going?
Well, Asheville's an interesting city. It's very fashionable to be
Right.
liberal in Asheville. So, regardless of the facts, you know how fashionable people are. But it's also, Asheville has a fairly high concentration of well-educated people from other parts of the country. So you have that group, and then we have the blue collar community as well. So it's really a blending pot. And so while Asheville's usually attributed being liberal, only parts of it are.
Right, and it's surrounded by more conservative communities. I mean, I've been
Yeah,
to Asheville. You have kind of that. It reminds me a little bit in Boston of the Cambridge kind of slightly
yeah,
the hippie generation,
yes.
and at the same time, you've got the very conservative people kind of intermingling and part of it. It's an interesting mix. I guess this gets into a bigger question here, Bruce, which is why is it that the top 1% wealthiest people in this country are so liberal? If you take a look, Forbes magazine publishes an annual top richest Americans. And if you take a look at that list, 9 out of 10 of them are identifiably liberal. And these are people who are heads of corporations that have a very liberal culture. And liberals are the ones who kind of are working themselves up the line, whereas conservatives are not. That's also true in our academia, in our educational institutions, our entertainment institutions, our media institutions, even in our churches, and our big corporations. They're all controlled by liberals. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that what your ambition is important in terms of understanding that. So, if your ambition is to be, religious, it's not necessarily going to be successful in business. Not that the two don't go hand in hand in
Right.
some, but your priorities are more for fairness. And so when I think about the Bill Gateses of the world and stuff like that,
Right. Hmm.
he was about as notorious and difficult a person to do business with when he first started Microsoft as you could find. The people that he had lawsuits against and stuff like that. So I think at some point it's almost like leeches get attached to them, and convince them that this is the way you should go. Okay. So there are other people that believe in God and believe that's the way you should go. So I think, our objective isn't to be wealthy. Our objective is to be faithful. So when you don't have that, materialism is what you're chasing. This is how you end up that way. And when you have a lot of money, liberals are going to attach themselves to you, and that's, I think, that's the voice that they're hearing. So
Yeah. No, I think that's very interesting to look at it. I mean, I think as you go up into success, you compromise, some of your values, assuming you ever had any, and you do that to get ahead. You get the message that the easier path is to be liberal,
right,
and to not be liberal is a risk. You can end up being denounced. You can have what is a modern version of an auto da fe, publicly crucified, reputation shattered,
right,
alienation from people. It hurts your business. So we take the course of least resistance, the easy way. I mean, I don't care because I don't have a skin in the game, but I know people who do. They're college students. They're starting out in business. They don't want to bring that kind of attention on themselves. They have a career. I understand that. So they internalize it. They compromise, and they become a part of this unthinking kind of mindset, this beehive that is basically has turned its back on God and has turned its back on bigger truths, and that's focused on what's happening in the here and now. In a way, it's a resurrection of the ancient Greek concept of the so not the sophists. The sophists were the first lawyers. There's another word of the Epicureans. They believe that everything in existence was whatever was happening in the moment. There's
right,
no there's no past, there's no future, there's no bigger spiritual question. It's all what you experience, your sensate, and that's the ultimate goal, happiness. In other words, whatever feels good is good, and to say otherwise, you're prejudiced. You're something wrong with you. I mean, that's the mentality I think of today. That's what's become predominant in the high ground of our culture. Perhaps one of the biggest Pied Pipers of that in our modern times was none other than former President Bill Clinton.
yeah, that's a very good example. By the way, he's a Methodist,
Okay.
and they'll throw that out, but they won't go to a Methodist church. So there's four wonderful books in the Bible: First Kings, Second Kings, First Chronicles, and Second Chronicles, right?
Hmm.
And what I was just talking about is well well documented. You have king after king that gets enthralled with people telling them how great they are and how wonderful they are, only to fall. And that's what I mean about being being faithful to God requires walking away from the ways of the world, no matter no matter what part of the Judeo-Christian religion you believe. There is always that moment. And if the people you're talking about, like Soros and Gates, they've turned away from that and they've made it pretty. And how they've made it pretty is with the liberal veneer. Believe me, if you take away some of Bill Gates's niceties, he won't be liberal anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the Book of Kings talks about how the children of Israel went to the prophet Samuel and begged him for a king, so they could be like the other nations. And
Right,
it's a very interesting passage. I can't quote it, but Samuel warns them, and he says, they'll enslave your sons and rape your daughters, and right. I mean, steal your property. You'll become, he goes on, and he warns them, and yet they succumb to that, and it was a step away from the mission of the original Israelites to do that. And I think that the American system is based upon those principles in the Book of Judges. I mean that rights come from God, not from the state, as you said earlier. That we are sovereign citizens under the great sovereign who is God, and that as citizens we give a limited grant of government to preserve and protect and defend those rights, nothing more.
Simple.
I just don't know if young people though understand this. They think the government is the grantor of rights. The government does things for you, and that you're to look to the government as a source of rights, and it's completely contrary to the American um, political philosophy, which goes all the way back to Genesis, when God created both men and women in His image. In
Yes.
His image, He created them. I mean, it was not He's the sovereign, and that man is an image of God. Man is not God. Those who want to hold the state up as a sovereign over people, they're worshiping the state as God.
Right.
There's some kind of a utopian idea, which is the hallmark of both Nazism and communism. It's the modern socialist movement. It's a turning its back from God. This is a sin of the Garden of Eden.
That's and that's the point I'm making. We all have this. We always stand at this crossroad in life, and whether it happens every minute or happens every hour, is what is the behavior that God would expect from us, and the more in tune with God you are, and the more you understand the Bible and you understand the lessons of the Bible, the more you're going to take the right road. And when you're not, and what you were just saying is this point about the government, you're going to do what you think is going to get you by the government or have the government help you. But the government isn't God. God is God.
Right. And the government and people are flawed. We're surrounded by lies and false information. You have to look within and try to hear the voice of God to know truths and to know
Right.
what's false. Everyone is capable of that. Every single human being. We're all created in the image. No one
Yeah.
is a monopoly on knowing God. We can all know God, and are all capable of it if we allow ourselves to do it. So anyway, Bruce, this whole thing is just such a nail biter for me. I mean, I'm sure for most people who care about these things. And I don't know what's going to happen. I just don't know. I pray, but I don't know.
Well, I look at I look like at the movements of God, um, and so whatever happens because of God's will, right? So what my daughter lives in Seattle. I have two of my daughters live in Seattle, and one doesn't live directly in the city and one does. Well, here's what she's doing tonight. She's packing up her bags and moving in with her sister, planning for a week. And
Mm,
the reason is, if Biden doesn't win, they're going to burn Seattle. So she wants to
exactly.
get out of the city. And and that's the type of stuff that is starting to sway the people that you were talking about over to personal freedom. And you think about the amount of people that are starting to revolt against De Blasio in New York City, and it's all because of their bad behavior, and they don't see that. So that I see that as the movement of God. My hope and what my prayers are is that enough people see this, that we send a message to the Adam Schiffs, the Nancy Pelosi's, the Chuck Schumers, the George Soroses of the world. We know what you're up to. We know what you're doing, and so does God. And that the election goes favor of Trump. And I have one more prayer.
Yeah,
The prayer I
please.
pray that President Trump tones down his language for the next 4 years, because it would make life easier for him.
Or at least for the next 48 hours.
Yeah, yeah,
um, but no, I mean, can you imagine in this country that we would be we're afraid of violence on our peaceful election day? I mean, this is unprecedented in American history. This is what they do in Paris in 1893 when they took out the guillotine, 1793.
yeah.
This is communist revolution. And that's exactly what this is. I hope people see that. The fact that they burned Seattle, I mean, Seattle's probably going to vote for Biden, and that they're going to burn their own city. I mean, they already have burned it. Why aren't the people of Seattle waking up? Are they going to wake up? Why is it that you take a look at the map, and you see that most of the country is red, which means that they're conservative, and the big blue spots are the big cities, and which
Yeah,
is where all the money is. I
right.
mean, what are they? Are they that out of touch with their own humanity that they, I mean, we used to have a situation where, like when Reagan ran for a second term, he got a lot of Democrats supporting him. Nixon certainly did in '72, and probably a lot of Republicans supported Obama the first time because he fooled enough people to think that he was more conservative. The point is that people weren't that much into like this hardcore polarized thing, and I just what do you think is accounting for that?
I think it's part of. I think we've lost our manners as Americans. Our manners in the sense of respect for the Constitution, respect for each other, respect for God. I think it's very easy today to get away with saying these things because we see our leaders doing it, and so what's happened is it's created this great divide. Not this past summer, the summer before, I hiked the Appalachian Trail, and
Mm-hmm.
you spend a lot of time in Republican country, which is so gets to your point, right? Because it's, as you know, in Massachusetts, you have that wonderful section out
The
through.
western part of the state, yeah.
Yeah. So I heard this comment. We were ending the day, and we were starting to get ready to go into town, and I met one of the local people. This was in Eastern Tennessee. This is pure Trump country.
Mm-hmm.
And I introduced myself to him. He said, I'm Bob, and I'm deplorable. And so that's what I think is at the root of this divisiveness, is the name calling. Like, I guess Hillary called them deplorables, and I think the Biden this past week called them ugly.
Ugly and chumps. Yeah, absolutely.
That's where we're losing the ability to debate. I mean, you certainly remember Nixon. That was 100% what was right and what was wrong. It had nothing to do with Democrats or Republicans.
Right.
And the second thing is if you noticed, all the votes follow party line. The reason is Pelosi says, if you don't vote my way, there'll be no funding for your next election. So we're
Oh yeah,
creating.
well, that's right.
So that I think we have to send a message back out of this vote that we've had enough.
Well, I mean, I agree. I mean, I hope that enough people know this. I just we just it's almost like at this point it's going to be impossible to know. We just have to, as they say in Yiddish, we're sitting on spielkas, until until late tomorrow night, and then we're going to find out. Hopefully,
Yeah.
um, I don't think. I mean, I know that people that I know are telling me that it's going to be a landslide for Trump. I don't believe it will be. Um, Steve Turley, who I respect a lot, he's very optimistic. I'm not that. I just want him to win. I think that he's going to do better than he did last time, and that includes even in Massachusetts and across the board. Um, of the battleground states, I think he's probably going to carry most of them. He may lose in Pennsylvania, but I think he's going to probably continue with Michigan and Ohio, and and of these other states that are formerly Clinton states, I think he might even pick up a few of those. Maybe Minnesota, that would be amazing. Nevada, New Mexico. There are a couple that look like they're in play. I think the Republicans will hold on to the Senate, even though they may lose a seat or two, but they may gain elsewhere. But they'll hold on to the Senate. And while I don't think they're going to take the House, I think they're going to close the margin. Right now, the Democrats have 17 more, and that's not many out of 400 congressmen.
Right.
I think that number will shrink down to maybe 10, maybe 9, and that's going to result in Nancy Pelosi being booted out of that office. And I think a more radical left winger is going to become Speaker of the House, maybe somebody like AOC. So those are my predictions. What are yours?
Well, I think that I'm hearing the same thing you are hearing. I heard the press secretary. I can never pronounce her name. Wonderful
McElhaney, she's amazing.
McElhaney, and she was quoting some of their own data. And she's, I think she's as good a press secretary as we've had for
Oh, incredible. Absolutely
decades.
amazing. Yep.
decades. So, and then I'm hearing and seeing the same things you are, not polls, but I'm watching these Trump rallies and then I'm watching the Biden rallies. It's the complete difference. So that's why I believe, but I also agree with you. It's not a landslide. It's probably going to be close. I think that if Trump wins, Pelosi's done.
Exactly.
Done. No matter if she does win the House, because she put a lot of emotional energy, financial energy, and political energy into getting him impeached.
She did.
And it didn't work. It didn't.
Oh, it was horrible. I've never seen more ugly opposition. I mean, and the fact they would not give Trump any money at all to fund the wall, which is something they would have supported if it had been Clinton.
Right.
It was so obviously partisan and so wrong. I hope that catches up to them.
Yeah. So I think Pelosi made a very tactical error and also a moral error.
For sure.
He's the president of the United States. Be civil.
Yeah.
I'm worried about the Senate. So if the Senate rolls, now you got a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate. They're going to go after Trump, and he's going to spend the next 4 years defending himself.
Yeah.
And that's awful. So I hope we keep the Senate. I hope Trump. I think we'll keep the Senate. I think we'll keep Trump. And I think that what you were saying, there'll be a squeezing of the representatives, but even still, that will be a signal to everybody, and we've had enough. The American people have had enough.
Oh, I mean, I don't think that if Trump wins, I don't honestly think that they can do the same thing with the constant impeachments and the phony dossiers and the fake news. I just think people are tired of that. It's going to have to be that they're going to have to stand up and tell us why socialism is great, which is what they should do, so we can argue it in the public square.
Right.
I actually think that's fine. I'm happy to make that argument. I mean, that's if somebody like AOC becomes Speaker of the House, then we'll have that argument, and that's great because they'll lose. But either way, that's the way it's supposed to be done.
I think her power base shrinks as well. So I'm going to give you another wild prediction here.
Sure.
I think we'll go more moderate with the Democratic. They'll say this really what you guys laid out didn't work, and we're not following it anymore because we want to represent constituency. Second thing is mainline media, newspapers, CBS, CNN, they're done.
Well, maybe the Democrats will go back to being a more normal opposition party, the party of JFK as opposed to the party of Ted.
Yeah.
But
well, so yeah, so we'll see. I mean, I hope that we're right, but anyway,
we shall see. All we can do now is, as I say, sit on Spielkus and wait because
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing. I don't know if anyone's going to be swayed at the last minute. I can just say, get out and vote, especially if you're voting for Trump. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your associates, send it out on your social network page. This is a very critical election. Do we want to have 4 more years of the incredible successes Trump has had across the board? Even liberals have to admit, if you look at any objective metric on success, Trump's administration has been extremely successful across the board. We want to keep that going. So, as the Irish of Boston used to say, vote early and vote often. Anyway, so Bruce, where can people get your excellent book?
On Amazon.com. So the first edition we only did in Kindle. And then the next one comes out next week. It's called Spend a Year with Jesus for 2021 because it's a 1-year thing. So the book really sells well in November and December.
Mm-hmm.
But we pretty much do it just on Kindle because there's so many images in the book. It's unless we made it into a coffee table book, which isn't the purpose. Right. So
Excellent. Well, I hope to have you back after the election to do some post-election wrap up.
Anytime, Charles. This has been very enjoyable. I really appreciate your thoughts.
Same here, Bruce. Listen, have a great